Breakages, structural failures, rule breakages, and one team absolutely smashing the competition this month. This is the November Recon Report. So here's a cumulative time on the water for each team, and we can see how Alinghi with their head start have amassed plenty of hours on the water. Emirates Team New Zealand with the AC40 were next up, but American Magic with a fantastic month have really closed the gap. And if we look at just November's time on the water, then we can see how good of a month this has been for American Magic. So looking at each of the teams and the stats that really stand out for me, Alinghi, I think the big thing for them has been how long they've been off the water since the 16th of the 11th. And that's got me thinking, what could the next bit of tech be that we see from Alinghi? Now, they didn't do as much to their AC75 on launch. I think they'd removed the bowsprit and removed the backstays from its old kind of Auckland configuration. But they have got some significant changes they could still make. And I'm thinking conversion to cyclors, a tacking jib rather than a self-tacking jib. I've got a feeling it's something that's kind of required some structural changes on the boat. And obviously they've already made the switch to boomless setup on the mainsail sheeting that we saw last month. The challenges for them, despite good time on the water, a really low manoeuvre rate, really low success rate in terms of foiling tacks and jibes as well, and that's not really changed, only a very slight improvement for November, so they'll be looking to really get into their stride when they return to sailing. American Magic, the standout performers of this month, the most time on the water, not quite as many manoeuvres as Emirates Team New Zealand, but the flip side is they are sailing an AC75, which with full crew rather than batteries, so you've got to recharge the boat, which that does kind of hamper the amount of manoeuvres you can just fire into. A decent foiling manoeuvre percentage rate, and actually an increase on the previous month. It's especially a good foiling manoeuvre rate when you see that the conditions they've been sailing in has generally been lighter than what Emirates Team New Zealand was seeing in Auckland. So as long as he's been on the boat, picking up the second hand, basically doing that kind of Rossa system with the dual helms. Tech, they've had a few new mainsails this month, which to me look pretty good. They've also improved their jib sheeting, but they still all the time pretty much on a really steep jib sheeting angle. So that's one question the Recon team could be asking, is that because they don't have adjustment at the tack, which is another way of changing your sheeting angle, or is it something to do with the self-tacking jib that's been retrofitted to the boat? But they do seem to be quite often very steep, especially compared to Emirates Team New Zealand on their AC40. So if they're always at the top end of that clue board, it suggests they would really like a little bit more range on that sheeting angle. Emirates Team New Zealand, so a good month, still not quite as many manoeuvres as American Magic, but a much higher foiling percentage. Their foiling percentage did drop, interestingly though, from the previous month, and this is with the change to their LEQ12 configuration for the AC40, so not sailing on autopilot anymore. Their new kind of curved anhedral foil and different control setups aboard, so cost them a little bit in their kind of foiling manoeuvre percentage, but still a heck of a lot of manoeuvres, very efficient time on the water. But the big challenge for them, the big news item this month really, was their crash, a corkscrewing nosedive which ripped off the bow. We'll be chatting to the lads in a little bit about the fix for that and the look ahead and kind of onward implications for the other teams. Rossa, not a great month for them. Again, just one of these two teams with the LEQ12s who've had a stuttering start to the campaign. They didn't make life easy for themselves as well, dropping the mast and losing about 20 days with a repair. Not only to the mast that they dropped on the quay, but also in the process of that damaged the port side of their rudder gantry. So kind of a little bit of a schoolboy mistake. Tech-wise, we saw an interesting little deployment of a sensor on their foil, but then that has subsequently been embroiled in the other big news item of the month, which is the rule wranglings around sensors, and removed immediately from the boat after that rule inquiry went through. End of the month though, a lot better. Got quality days on the water with decent foiling manoeuvre rates. Hopefully, looking into the next month, things are picking up for Luna Rossa. INEOS starting to get worried about INEOS's program. The highly censored test boat, it was a little bit late being unveiled from what we anticipated, and then a whole month went by until they got it on the water for some tow testing, without the tow mast that we'd seen on the first day of unveiling. That had a rule challenge about the legality of that second mast. They do have, this month we saw them kind of rigging up, stepping their carbon sailing mast. So they have that in the quiver, but yet to use it sailing. We do get to see some of INEOS's new technology though. This main sheet ram, it looks very familiar, like those used on all the other boats for a boomless main sheet setup. And we see these mast rotation levers used by Magic and Luna Rossa for their boomless setups. These hydraulic rams have also appeared on the side of INEOS. They're pulling a 1:2 block fast ratio, and I believe it's to adjust the traveller system, pulling the main sheet car across the back of the boat to adjust the sheeting angle. Quite interesting that they're mounted on the deck, not beneath the deck. Maybe that's just making them easier to access for reconfiguration. It's hard to know exactly what their program would have been, but if that tow mast has really cost them this month on the water, then some questions to be asked about that, which we'll get into with the lads in just a moment. That's enough of the stats for today. Gonna talk through some of the key points with Rob and Tom. Thanks to Ben Palmer, he sorted out all the algorithms behind the dashboard this month to help us get the data out. Let's talk about the tow mast. That was the big story of this month, or the second half of this month at least. Quite a big month with all that's gone on. Do we think INEOS have really massively messed up and lost a month of sailing to this tow mast rules? Or do you think this was kind of part of their program, or there was additional delays going on there?
Well, I mean, the tow mast, we all really liked it as an idea, but it's turned into massive white elephants, hasn't it? And maybe if they'd done a bit of a deeper investigation of the rules, they could have preempted this. So, yeah, unfortunately, we're never going to see that happening. I thought it'd been cool.
Yeah, it's a real shame. I think it's a shame to see something innovative not get past go. Oh, we've discussed this before, but I think it might be hiding other problems that they've had going on in terms of, are they actually 2, 3, maybe 4 months late with Christmas coming up, getting on the water, whether that's potentially design delays. I mean, the tow mast could have been an afterthought to actually probably quite quick to put together, to help when they know they're not going to get sailing time in. They've tried something.
Yeah, because the rule inquiry could have been themselves asking the question. If it was themselves asking the question, why didn't they ask it ages ago? So that suggests it might have been quite a late thought from them. We've included in this video, in the INEOS section, I showed some of the new hydraulics fitted to the deck. And actually, just as we speak, we've been flicking through some really interesting photos of additional kind of structures on the deck as well. So all of that only coming on now suggests that they weren't ready to go sailing anyway. So the tow mast could have been a stopgap, yeah, and a light wind toy. On to the next one, the other kind of big news item this month, and that was Emirates Team New Zealand's bow falling off their AC40. This has kind of really been covered to death, but we've seen a fix for it come out from Emirates Team New Zealand. Looking at that, looking at the images you've seen, what's your feel for when we'll see that boat back on the water?
Well, I think now that that bow's out of the environment, they can really start work on the new bow.
Get the cardboard derivatives correct.
Yeah. I mean, the first thing is they need to clear the mould of the existing 40, because that you can't just rebuild a bow like that on the fly, loose, as it were.
Assuming there is a boat in the mould.
Now that they know what they're going to do, anything's particularly long lead time, I'd be amazed if we don't see that boat on the water really early in the new year. I'd say 2nd of January is my prediction for that.
Just to cover over some of the whereabouts of these boats, so Emirates Team New Zealand had the first AC40 that they're commissioning. The next one went to INEOS, and that's going to have some sort of retrofit, which presumably will have to be modular to fit into the front tank. So INEOS might actually be one of the worst teams affected by this if they can still keep the production schedule for the later boats that haven't been built yet. Emirates Team New Zealand then have the third boat arriving, which apparently was in the yard coming to them for fit out anyway. So they potentially have their second 40 available soon. And I checked over the rules recently. So basically, the components from your LEQ12 you can put on any 40.
Okay.
So the way the rules are written, there's certain key components which you're limited the number of, like a mast, famously, and for foils, but you're actually not limited for how many LEQ12s or AC40s you can build. So you can build an infinite, or have an infinite amount. So you can buy as many AC40s as you want, but obviously as long as, and all the one designed components don't count. So you can buy as many of them, but LEQ stuff does count towards the component. So effectively you can only ever have one LEQ12.
Can you,
out of cash.
at a time? So you can't...
No, altogether.
So you could...
Get wet. So INEOS could put their test foils from their LEQ
onto their
40,
yeah.
And a mast, presumably their sailing mast, onto the 40 and stuff like that. Same with Rossa, but it can't go...
So actually Team New Zealand and American Magic are both going down the two AC40s as their LEQ12 platform and AC40 platform. It is kind of smart, because you basically have two platforms that are just totally interchangeable.
So it is another point that you get more redundancy by having two AC40s, because all the AC40 components are interchangeable without counting to your allowance. But if you put an AC40 component on an LEQ12 outer plus, it then counts. So INEOS can't use any of the spare equipment from their second boat, and same with Rossa, but the other teams can. So in terms of breakages, the two AC40 is actually quite good. Let's get dates. So I've already said somewhere online in one of the comments when asked me, and I don't know, whatever date I said, I think it was mid-January, I think it went for 12th of January, I said the boat would be back on the water.
I just said 2nd of January.
I'm going to go somewhere in between. So I think the 8th.
8th of Jan, okay, cool. We'll see where they get to. American Magic, fantastic month this month. So much footage, coverage coming out of their sailing days. Most hours on the water. They've, not most manoeuvres, actually Team New Zealand still had more, but they've absolutely smashed it, looking great in their legacy AC75. Are we now thinking that having an AC75 is the prominent strategy?
I think it works really nicely for that American Magic team, because they actually have quite a lot of sailors now who don't really have cup experience in a 75. What they can do on a 75 where you have 8 crew is they're cycling people through the positions more regularly. And I think now they've had Slingsby there all month, they've had Goody there all month. They've got a number of other sailors who have had some helming time. They've got Lucas Calabresi's now on board getting, cut boat foiling experience. And Slingsby yesterday in his interview said that they're going to be in a position where when their 40s arrive, they'll have 2 sailing teams who can jump straight onto that. Whereas I think if they just had 140 at the beginning, that'd be great for 4 guys, but it's effectively halving the number of man hours you can put into training up your new team members.
But they've obviously made that decision, haven't they? That's been their pathway that they wanted to go down, and they've actually, in some ways, it's working for them at the moment.
I mean, they're lucky in that they had a 75 that wasn't a total lemon. I don't think INEOS would even have had the option to go down that route, really.
So yeah, interesting strategy. They've still got obviously some difficulties there in that they can't test like new generation foils on that 75, you'd need an LEQ12 or modified AC40 to do that. But you know, we were discussing this a minute ago, thinking about the lead times for a boat versus the lead time of the foils. Potentially that doesn't really matter. Lead time for the boat, they'll want to sign up that early next year. So if you want a LEQ12 to test hull shapes, then you'd want that boat now. But if you're testing foil shapes on your LEQ12, then actually having that next year.
Well, you can see that a build process from like starting to build a mould to having your AC75 ready on the water. How long do you think that would take? A year? So actually, you're talking that even if they've signed off now, they're not getting a boat on the water till February, the year of the Cup. So then they've only got what, 9-8 months.
I was thinking you've just got to kind of play the hand you're dealt. It's like American Magic had a 75 that was quite a good platform. There's obviously a queue for when you get your 40s, so that would have been a known date for them. It wouldn't have been soon enough to get them sailing early. And their other option would be like, well, do we build an LEQ 12 or do we just use what we've got? And it's way more kind of cost effective and resource effective to just use what you have, if what you have is good enough. And I think we kind of all agree that their platform was good enough. So
it seems like Luna Rossa and INEOS had specific questions they wanted to answer. I think Luna Rossa wanted to test that sail/trench hull interface, and the only way they could get data about that soon enough was to build a scale model this far out, so it kind of made sense for them. INEOS obviously didn't think a whole lot of the data they got collected from the last Cup, so just want something where they can collect data for validation, presumably into foils, because it's probably going to come too late for hull and sails now, looking at the timeline they're on.
I just don't think you learn anything on the hull from that boat, really. It's so boxy and just, it looks like it's just a carrying sensors platform, isn't it?
But INEOS have got this whole new design team that actually, to then just go, actually think about, actually no, we're not going to do the hull, we're just going to go with the AC40 and commit to a new AC75. That, on the face of it, that's quite a high risk strategy for a whole new design team. So they almost had, their hand was dealt down the LEQ12 route because they needed a test run of that whole process to see if it works and to how to improve it.
And Luna Rossa said this, didn't they? They were like, the LEQ12 is not just about the boat itself, it's about the whole process of going through design, build, and getting that on the water.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing I said when we were just discussing now about, you know, all the issues INEOS have had and whether we thought the lateness is due to the design, whether it's construction, whether it's parts. But at least they're having all these problems now and working through that process. And the same for Luna Rossa, you know, learning how to step their mast. That's been invaluable.
How many people in the
That crane
INEOS
driver's not going to get another job at an AC team.
How many people in the INEOS design team?
114. Yeah.
Yeah, so are you surprised that they're a bit late if they're trying to coordinate 114 designers?
Not at all. And I think, is it bad that they're late? Well, it's an inconvenience, but actually to collaborate all of that, all these ideas, people that aren't au fait with, might not even be au fait with sailing, and just or even the construction, how boat builders work versus people that build F1 kit. It's just a completely different ball game. And
yeah, and I think if you were going to cut INEOS a little bit of slack, you would say there's quite a large global situation in the shape of war in Ukraine going on. So, you know, a lot of raw materials would normally come from that part of the world. And is it feasible that they've been hit by that on lead times? Yeah, it is kind of likely. And the Americans and the Kiwis are less likely to be impacted by that because they'll have their own supply chains in their parts of the world.
They almost definitely won't be. Yeah.
So you'd say Luna Rossa and INEOS possibly more likely to be affected by that?
Right, next point was, and this is going back almost a complete month now, but it's been jam-packed month with like developments. The banana foil from Emirates Team New Zealand, lots of talk about the re-emergence of anhedral in this, but for me, you know, the big feature of that, which was just incredible, was the kind of constant curve it had to it, but seemingly with still a flap, and how the mechanics of that work, I can't think how it would work.
Neither of us. Just the concept of something bending in a constant way when it's curved.
Yeah.
It's not how, if you think of a piano hinge, that's not how, if you were to bend a piano hinge, it definitely wouldn't work.
Yeah.
But well, I know Rob's got a good theory.
I've got a slightly more extreme theory on this, and I think that they don't have movable flaps. I don't think you need to be able to trim your flaps to be able to fly these boats. I think you can control the lift of the main foils by pitching the boat fore and aft using the rudder. And I think you can control the vertical component of the lift coming from the main foil by canting the whole foil arm in and out. So it might look like it has flaps. Everyone's questioning how would you move those flaps. I think it's time to expand our minds and appreciate that it might not be able to adjust its flaps.
So without going, what you said about pitching the boat fore and aft, without going in too much kind of techie detail, like roughly for every degree that you pitch something, the lift coefficient changes by approximately 0.1 plus or minus. So if you pitch bow down by 4 degrees, that will reduce the lift coefficient of the main foil by approximately 0.4. So it is conceivable that if you're running an aggressive bow down, if your rudder is big enough, you might have to run a bigger rudder, potentially, to operate.
We saw some pretty aggressive trim angles last time.
We did.
We're also seeing them position their rudder and foil and main foils as close as possible within the rule, so there's as much longitudinal instability as you can get. And I just think when the boat's in floating mode, the angle of that, when the boat's in floating mode going slow, what you're trying to do is achieve as much vertical lift as you can possibly get as early as possible. If the boat's 8 tons, you're trying to generate 8 tons of lift as soon as you can. So you have the foil running pretty horizontal, and it will be at whatever angle of attack you set it on the foil arm. As soon as that then starts lifting, the boat starts coming clear of the water, and those main hull sections come clear, and it's only the bustle in there. You can start winding the rudder how you want.
Yeah.
And then as soon as the boat starts generating heeling force, you counteract that by winding your foil arm out.
Which effectively reduces your lift.
Yeah, exactly.
Increases your side force.
So I think it's totally feasible that you can fly the boat without needing to adjust the flaps on the foil. So all I'm saying is it wouldn't surprise me if the question is not how are they adjusting this flap between 2 curves, but are they adjusting the flap?
I mean, the boats are, considerably lighter. I think like 20% lighter this time. The foil span, significant increase. So, but part of me, I'm just so trained to looking at the last cup's foils and seeing quite kind of significant flaps on them, significant tips. They're obviously really cranking the lift on them to get out. Like, that's the only part of me that's holding back. The flip side is that I don't have any counter argument to what you're saying because I can't explain how the flap will work on the curve.
I think the other thing to consider is that people would say, well, how do you deal with like the really rapid responses you might need for gusts, shifts, waves? And I think you can deal with those by having a foil that will deflect in an appropriate manner, and that is done via very clever composite design and laminate schedule.
I think also, with alluding to what you're saying, Mozzy, that you see the other teams with big flaps, so they're obviously intent on using them. So if this theory is right, then kind of is the Emirates to New Zealand way of thinking outside the box and how we can make our system explore a different avenue that other teams don't appear to have looked at.
I mean, do you need rapid movement on the flap when you're in flying? Because it's really only the speed that's affecting that. It's not as if your acceleration is so great that you're suddenly popping out the water.
These boats are massive. They don't accelerate that quickly.
You're talking about a fraction of a percent, so you probably don't. You can handle that with pitch. You're just looking at your ride height and changing the pitch on the elevator.
Everyone's mindset for foiling boats is based on international moths, or was, because all that was really known about high-performance sailing boats was the whole use of an anhedral foil where the tip comes clear of the water, and you know, conventional hydrofoiling technologies, as it were.
Yeah.
So as you ride higher, more foil comes out of the water, so you have less lift, so the boat falls back down and you reach this point of equilibrium. You know, that's kind of conventional hydrofoil theory that people have obviously been aware of since the 50s, you know, it's maybe even earlier, before. Then in sailing terms, all the sailors are coming to this with moth experience. Well, in a moth, you don't have a man who sits there and like manually adjusts the foil all the time. So you just have a flap that links to the whole wand system. But you know, once your mindset is saying that is how you control ride height of a foiling platform, you've got to take quite a big step back from that to go, do you know what, why are we doing that? You know, I go windsurf foiling all the time. I don't have any flaps on that. I control it with pitch and trim of the board.
I mean, those the New Zealand foils look like almost every wing foil.
Yeah,
out there, and
they're
I
like
think
racing kite foils.
Yeah, and I think a lot of these sailors now wing foiling rather than moth sailing.
Yeah,
because of the accessibility of it, and that's what I've heard from speaking to someone within North, is that they're all wing foiling.
I think it makes a lot of sense, and you certainly find from the windsurfer and you on the wing, you feel so directly connected to that platform that it's a very good like learning experience. It's not something going on in a system and did you have that system set up right or not. It's literally like, are the forces you're applying to the system through your feet doing what you think they're doing? So I think you learn very quickly doing that. And like I say, you can foil absolutely fine with no adjustability of anything other than pitch and trim. And we're saying, well, let's chuck the rudder in as well, which is effectively like changing your tail wing angle on your wing foil.
It's a very good theory.
And I've got more extreme theories on the foils.
I know you do.
We'll save them for future episodes.
Yeah, okay.
Let us know in the comments what you think of Rob's theory. Yeah, I don't know what I think of Rob's theory, to be honest. Well, thank you very much for watching. I'm not sure when we're going to put next Recon thing. We've got this annoying Christmas holiday at the end of next month, but hopefully we'll be back early January to see what the teams have been doing. Hopefully we won't do too much at the end of next month when Christmas is, because then that'll give us a break. But, yeah.
I mean, surely they're sailing all the time. What's wrong with them? They don't need to go for Christmas.
Yeah. Unfortunately, this is on the internet, but I would definitely take Christmas out in Mallorca, moth sailing, and over going to the in-laws. I know the in-laws watch this as well. But
yeah, Emma can't hear you.
Yeah. Right, well, we'll see you hopefully early January for the next Recon report. Thanks for watching.